7,000 miles. That is how far a single predator walked across a supercontinent to claim a throne on the other side of the world. And for 100 years, science had no idea it happened. A 2023 paper published in Current Biology just found the fossil evidence in South Africa. And what it reveals about how ecosystems collapse is more disturbing than the animal itself. Picture what 7,000 miles actually looks like. New York to Moscow is roughly 4,600 miles. This predator walked farther than that, across a single landmass, to fill an ecological vacancy left by predators that had already gone extinct before the main event even started. Subscribe if you want the science before the textbooks catch up. New video every week. And if Dunkleosteus sent you here, this one goes 5 million years further back. The animal is called Inostrancevia. It was a Gorgonopsian, a group of proto-mammals that invented the saber-tooth 250 million years before the famous Ice Age cats. Not a dinosaur, not a reptile, a proto-mammal, more closely related to you than to any dinosaur that ever lived. For a century after its first fossils were discovered in Russia in 1899, science assumed it was a Russian predator. That was the only place it had ever been found. That assumption held for 124 years. Then Christian Camera at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences examined fossil material from South Africa's Karoo Basin, the richest Permian fossil site on Earth, and found something that shouldn't have been there. 2 large predatory animals that matched Inostrancevia. Not a close relative, Inostrancevia itself, named Inostrancevia africana in the Current Biology paper, published May 22, 2023. DOI:10.1016/J.C, EEB.202.3.04.007. The question wasn't just how it got there. The question was why, and the answer changes everything about how we understand what was happening to this planet in the final 2 million years before the worst extinction event in Earth's history. Type walked if the 7,000-mile migration across a supercontinent is what surprises you most. Or mammal if you didn't know the first saber-toothed predators were proto-mammals, not cats or reptiles. I read everyone. Here is what the 2023 paper actually found, and why Camera called it unprecedented in the history of life on land. All the large apex predators in South Africa, the native Gorgonopsians, specifically a group called Rubiginae, went extinct before the end Permian mass extinction. Not during it, before. As the climate began to destabilize in the final approach to the Great Dying, the top predators of the southern hemisphere started disappearing first. The throne went empty, and Inostrancevia, the dominant predator of northern Pangaea, walked into that vacancy. The paper documents 4 complete turnovers of apex predator roles in less than 2 million years, in one ecosystem, in one region. 4 times, the animal at the top of the food chain was replaced by something entirely different. Camera described it directly. This shows that the shift in which groups of animals occupied apex predator roles occurred 4 times over less than 2 million years around the Permian-Triassic Mass Extinction, which is unprecedented in the history of life on land. 4 turnovers, 2 million years. The ecological equivalent of replacing the apex predator of the African savanna 4 times in the span of 20,000 years. Now the animal itself. Because this is where the science produces something that most coverage gets wrong by comparing it to the wrong thing. Type tiger if you already knew Inostrancevia was tiger-sized, or bigger if you assumed it was larger based on the saber-tooth reputation. I read everyone. Inostrancevia was 10 to 13 feet long, roughly the size of a Siberian tiger. But the skull was disproportionately large, up to 60 centimeters, nearly 2 feet of skull on a tiger-sized body. And the canine teeth reached 15 centimeters, 6 inches. Not the longest teeth of any animal ever, but among the longest functional killing weapons on any land predator in the history of vertebrate life before mammals. The teeth were not crushing instruments, they were blades with serrated edges, designed to drive deep into flesh and open wounds that wouldn't close. The biomechanics of the kill was almost certainly a precision strike to the throat or neck of large prey, using body weight to pin and the fangs to deliver a wound that bled the animal out. the same basic strategy Smilodon would rediscover 250 million years later. The skin, based on the Therapsid lineage and closest living analogues, was probably leathery, rhino or elephant-like rather than scaled, not the cold, scaly reptilian surface that most reconstructions default to. Inostrancevia was proto-mammalian. It was running warmer than a reptile, possibly endothermic or near endothermic, capable of sustained activity in a way that cold-blooded contemporaries couldn't match. This matters for the migration story. A cold-blooded animal cannot sustain a 7,000-mile overland journey across the interior of a supercontinent, across the kind of climate extremes that the Permian interior of Pangaea was generating in its final years. Inostrancevia could. Because it wasn't a reptile, the ecosystem it entered in South Africa had a vacancy at the top but was not empty. Smaller gorgonopsians were still present, Cyanosaurus, a much smaller predator. Art reconstructing the scene based on the fossil record shows Inostrancevia displacing Cyanosaurus from a kill. The big northern predator arriving in a foreign ecosystem and immediately occupying the apex role, not by defeating the local predators in combat, but by being too large and too capable for anything remaining to challenge. Here is what the arrival and rapid extinction of Inostrancevia in South Africa means for how we understand the Great Dying. Apex predators are the most sensitive ecological indicator in any food web. They require the most prey biomass. They are the first to collapse when the prey base shrinks. The fact that the South African apex predators started going extinct before the main extinction event, and that Inostrancevia arrived, briefly filled the gap, and then also went extinct, means the ecosystem was already in cascade failure before the Siberian Traps volcanoes reached their peak output. Camera put it directly. The arrival of Inostrancevia from 7,000 miles away and its subsequent extinction indicates that these top predators were canaries in the coal mine for the larger extinction event to come. The predators died first. Then everything else followed. Inostrancevia has no living descendants. It went extinct in the Permian-Triassic Mass Extinction along with every other gorgonopsian. The group that survived, the distant proto-mammal relatives called cynodonts, were smaller, less specialized, and capable of behaviors that the apex predators weren't. They burrowed, they sheltered. They survived on less. The same pattern as every major extinction. The most powerful, most specialized animals die first. The humble generalists inherit what's left. If you learned about the Permian from any source that didn't include a 7,000-mile predator migration driven by ecosystem collapse before the main extinction even started, you learned an incomplete version. The Great Dying didn't begin with Siberia. It began with the quiet disappearance of apex predators in South Africa, millions of years before the volcanoes reached full intensity. The 2023 paper proved it, and the animal that walked across the world to fill that gap is the clearest evidence we have of how completely the Permian world was already falling apart. If this changes how you think about mass extinctions, subscribe. Every week on this channel, we take what seems settled and show you what the evidence actually says. The next animal on this channel appeared in every dinosaur toy set ever sold. It has a sail on its back that nobody has ever fully explained. It went extinct 40 million years before the first dinosaur existed. And it was more closely related to you than to any reptile that ever lived. It's right here. Inostrancevia walked 7,000 miles to claim a throne. It held that throne for a geological instant. Then the world ended. And the humble little animals that knew how to hide inherited everything.